Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Battle Chads. I am Josh, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Luis.
Hello, hello, hello.
And we've got a very special guest today who we're going to be talking about sort of the prep up to the BnR that's happening in a couple of days from the recording of this podcast. We've got a Axion team member, Alex Gordon-Brown. How are you doing, Alex?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So we've come together to talk about sort of our preparation up until, we don't know what's going to get banned at this point, but we have a really good idea that the One Ring is going to be banned out of Modern, and everything else is sort of speculation, so we're not going to focus on that. So Alex has come to have that conversation with us, but you've also brought a very special deck that you're excited to take into the post BnR meta that you think will be really strong, and we'll talk about that later on in the pod.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Alex, before we move on, can you just tell us a bit about yourself, a bit your magical accolades? You know, you're part of Team Axion, which is probably the most well-known competitive team in the UK. Obviously, Axion is one of the biggest tournament organisers, if not the biggest tournament organiser in the UK. So yeah, if you don't mind telling us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been playing Magic since about 2010. Started out online, only switched over to paper in 2018. And then had a very good start. I top 8'd a GP, like my second GP in 2018 in GP Brussels.
Nice.
And then COVID hit, and I had less time. And I've had a sort of run of reasonable results, but nothing quite as extreme. I've played a lot of mid-rangey style decks, but I've also played a lot of Storm, which we'll come to later. And yeah, more recently starting to pick up Mega Modern top 8s, which had been very elusive in the past, despite many attempts.
You were also a part of the Invitational, right? You were one of the few lucky individuals that got that nice big invitation to it. How did you end up doing in the Invitational? Okay, decent, well? How did it go?
It was funny, actually, because I assumed I would do well in Modern and badly in Draft. I actually did poorly in Modern. We'll come back to that. And then in Draft, my pack one pick one was Overlord of the Mistmores. So
Nice. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Oh man, I think Will Hall would have loved to have been in your pod because he got a Oculus Pack 3, I think it was. So he opened a Mistmores like that. Oh, he'd have been so happy. Instead, he had his nice stinky little green-black deck, and didn't do too well with that one. So
did very well in the Modern, to be fair.
Super well in the Modern. Was it a 3-0 in the draft for you?
It was a 2-1. I think I went through 30 cards, didn't find my Overlord. It was very sad.
Fair enough. And then you've been playing Magic for what? You said 2018?
Paper 2018, like online since 2010.
2010. Okay,
started with Noble Hierarch.
Noble Hierarch. Okay, 2018 paper. That's exactly when I started. So I'm very fresh to a lot of the Magic scene compared to most. So that's you had quite a run there with the GPs doing really well. So what's the closest since then that you think you've gotten?
There was a period in early COVID where obviously nothing was running in paper, but like SCG ran some events. I did win one of those. They had their invitational. I did nice. Okay in that. So I've had like flashes, and I'm qualified for Prague in 2 months. It's Modern, so we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, we've got a few of the team actually, because obviously we're part of the team Chad Magic. We're that's our sort of competitive team. And there's a lot of I've not qualified. Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to even try to qualify. But a lot of the team is going in Prague in a couple of months, so it should be a good little trip for you all. I'm quite jealous, actually.
Yeah, a lot of the emails are coming out, I think, today. Everyone's just nervous, making sure their emails coming through that they're registered for Prague, that no one's been forgotten. So we're dealing with that whole situation right now, making sure everything's okay. But it's very exciting. A lot of us are going. I'm even taking the girlfriend over, so it should be really fun. A really nice trip coming up.
Yeah, I did enjoy when we went to the RC in Lille. I actually quite enjoyed that weekend, even if I didn't do too good in the main event. I did very well in the side events, and then I also had obviously do very well in the evening when you're with your mates having a few beers, etc. So it'll be even if you don't do very well actually on the event, you can't help but win when you're traveling playing Magic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it should be a really nice trip.
So prepping for a BnR is one of those weird things, and this is a unique situation for us because we are pretty confident, pretty certain that we know one boogie card is going to be leaving the modern format, and that is the One Ring. Now there is speculation to other stuff. If you look at like I saw a tweet the other day by Nikachu, who actually retweeted, that the top 10 most played cards was basically the Boros Energy deck list, like in Modern. So you had like, at the top you had the One Ring, and then you had Flage and Guide of Souls and all that good stuff. It's basically the Boros Energy. So there is strong speculation to suggest that something else is going to leave the format. But with BnRs and with Wizards the way they've been in the past with their sort of conservative bans, etc., we can't really work on speculation. But in the case, and you lads may disagree or agree, in the case of the One Ring, we are pretty certain that is going to go. Would you agree?
I think the community is very fed up of the card. I think that may be what swings it in the end.
Yeah. I think if that card were to stick around, it'd be the end of Modern, straight up. I don't think people would ever want to play the format again. So I think Wizards has to. Whether they want to or not, they have to.
So on that premise, for us as competitive players, that's really good, because what we can do now is we can start essentially the heads up process on entering a new Modern format, because we're pretty I guess it's a well-educated guess, or well-educated bet that this is going to happen. That being said, between us now, we've got 3 decks that we think are going to be really exciting into this post-ban world. Should we talk about my deck first? That I'm bringing to the table.
Let's go for it.
So obviously, this is me and Luis had to fight over this one because we both love this deck, but that's the Dimir Murktide deck. Now, recently,
Dimir Murktide, Josh,
Dimir
what?
Murktide? Oh my god,
blue black
frog. Yeah, I have an amphibian fetish. Sorry. So the 2 way to build the deck at the moment is the Oculus build and the Murktide build, and that basically replaces the threat. So instead of playing Murktide Region, which is your delve creature that is big, can be massive flyer that stacks well with the ability from Psychic Frog, you have the Abhorrent Oculus build, which uses Unearth to try and cheat it out of the graveyard to then have a game winning threat as early as turn 2. Now, in this meta with Boros, the current meta as it is, the Oculus build is better, but in a sort of non-energy world, I believe that the Murktide build is better, particularly in the mirrors and particularly against decks that aren't playing really efficient 1-mana removal. What's the energy one called again?
Galvanic Discharge.
Galvanic Discharge, but the other one, the 1-mana enchantment.
Static Prison, the best removal that's ever been printed. Yeah, exactly. That one. Yeah.
So when you're not facing decks that play that card, I believe Murktide is a much cleaner game winning and a much cleaner game winning threat, but it's also easier to get online and less flip the top of your deck and hope for the Oculus Unearth plan.
Yeah, so that definitely makes it a lot more consistent, right? Oculus makes you play bad cards like Thought Scour. Yeah,
like Thoughts. Yeah, it makes you play bad cards. Hope to flip the top of your deck just to keep up with the broken things that energy is doing. I think that if energy is lesser in the format because One Ring getting banned, or energy is less explosive because there's another card advantage engine through One Ring, I think the Murktide builds will come back and will potentially be stronger because of that consistency. I know, I can't wait to cast Preordains over Considers, for example. But yeah, Luis, the deck that you're excited to talk about.
So I'm really excited to talk about things like Black-Green Rock or Black-Green decks generally. I'm really interested to see how they hold up in this post-Ring ban meta. Because right now, if you look at literally any Black-Green style deck, and even most decks in Modern, generally speaking, if they're not combo and if they're not energy, they have the One Ring in some way, shape, or form, aside from Dimir Frog, which is our beloved. The Black-Green deck that's been doing really well against both energy and the combo decks has been running behind the strategy of I'm going to focus so hard on these decks to beat them and have the One Ring as just I'm going to draw cards and see what happens against other decks. Because it's a little poor sometimes when it comes to the Eldrazi decks and that kind of thing. Maybe you get them with a Fulminator Mage and loop it. But aside from that, it's a little poor against them.
Yep.
With the One Ring, it's able to keep up in card advantage. It's able to keep up in those kind of games. With it gone, what is it really going to move to? You know, in the days of old, you had more combo versions with like Yawgmoth. But now without it, can you really replace the One Ring? Can you still stay alive? I'm really excited to see what we can come up with to keep that Black-Green Rock deck alive, because I really enjoy it. I think it's really fun. But I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen. But I really like that shell of answer all toolbox kind of decks. It's very, very fun, very interesting, and it's a great way to handle a meta that has a lot going on when the One Ring's gone. And that's why I think that deck might be a sticking point for a lot of players coming into it.
Cool. Alex, I think this might be a good time to talk about the deck that you've been sweating, but you're also really excited to come into this post BnR world, which is I'll let you take it away what that deck is.
Yeah, so I've been playing a lot of Is It Storm. You can call it Is It Storm, you can call it Wizard Storm. And the thing here is that it's playing for Flame of Anor. And yeah, as you just said, I've been playing this for a while. But I can't help but note that, yeah, most of my losses have been to energy. And, the Invitational, I went to, played against a bunch of good energy players, went like 1-3 against them. And that was essentially the problem. So, pretty excited to see how this does in this post-BNR world.
Because Blue-Red Storm, very good at, doing its thing, keeping intact, removing hate, which is, something that a lot of the other Storm decks struggle against. Flame of Anor removing all the artifact hate possible that can hit you, while still keeping your hand full, withdrawing cards instead of just hoping you top deck a card. Because the other decks, they have to play the impulses and they go for it, and if they miss, you look like an idiot and it sucks. Being able to draw cards while removing a threat is really, really important.
Yeah, no, I mean it's completely on a different power level to every other answer to hate that people are playing. Like, obviously, if there's no good targets for it, which doesn't usually happen, then it's a little bit worse. Then it's like a 2-mana draw 2 as you're going off. But as soon as there's a hate card, it's completely absurd how much better this is than something like Static Prison or Pick Your Poison or anything like that.
So is this the main reason why you've gone the sort of green? The blue-red version rather than the green-red versions, because of essentially Flame of Anor? Yeah,
so the deck's still fundamentally a Storm deck, and I guess the thing to get across, if you've played this format, you've seen this. When this deck wins, it takes a really long turn that involves flipping over half your deck. Yeah. So if you're flipping over half your deck, and then there are 4 Static Prisons in your deck, that is brutal. Like, you flip over 3 of those Static Prisons, you just sort of end your own combo turn, and then you can't actually support the energy cost on Static Prisons, so that's a bit sad. Whereas when you're doing that and you hit Flame of Anor, like, it's a 2-mana draw 2 as you're going off, and it's like, it's not exciting, but it's a lot better than an actual blank. And then you combine that with the fact that it's just a 3-for-1 in a bunch of spots. Even if they have removal for your wizard, you still get the 3-for-1 aspect. And yeah, it's definitely by far the main draw to blue is that card.
Could you? So we have as the podcast getting bigger, I'm getting attracted to more sort of newer players into the game. Could you quickly or very briefly just go over the Storm combo? I mean, I know players like us, we're very aware of what Storm is and how it works and the triggered ability, etc. But just for someone who is looking into Modern, looking into actually getting into Magic the Gathering itself, what is this deck specifically? And we're going to attach a deck list. So we're not going to go through each individual card. We're going to attach a deck list, and you've kindly provided a sideboard guide for this deck as well. So we're not going to talk about each individual card, etc. But if you could just go over the combo, the win itself.
I'll bring it on screen for everyone as well, just so we all.
The nice thing about talking about Storm is that you really don't need to go through each individual card, because fundamentally the cards fall into a few categories, and there aren't that many categories. So basically, the game plan of this deck is you have a bunch of cards that make most of your spells cost 1 less. So you have Ruby Medallion, which says red spells cost 1 less. And you have Ral Monsoon Mage and Baral Chief of Compliance, which say instants and sorceries cost 1 less. And then most of the rest of your deck is red instants and sorceries. So if any of those cards are in play, then everything's cheap. And once everything's cheap, it gets a lot easier to start chaining things because you have these cards that generate mana. And usually the rituals, they only generate 1 mana. With a reducer, they generate 2. Manamorphos is usually mana neutral, but if you have a reducer in play, it's generating 1 mana for you and drawing a card. And then you have this pile of Ren's Resolve, Reckless Impulse type cards, which are basically 1 mana draw 2s in this spot. And the way it plays out is that you can basically, in most situations where you go off, I would say, you end up being able to flip over your whole deck if you want to. And you might notice a Thassa's Oracle in the sideboard just as a backup plan if you do in fact end up flipping over your entire deck.
I literally just noticed that just before you said it. I was looking at the sideboard and thought, oh, this is a Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, this is how you beat the One Ring in the. So that it is actually interesting to see whether that's still worth it in the post-ban world, but clearly in this world where you need to beat protection, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so the basic plan is you make mana, you draw cards with the mana. Some of the cards you draw let you draw more cards. Some of the cards you draw let you make more mana, and it all sort of builds up. And eventually, what you will be able to do is one of a few things. So one thing is just that Ral Monsoon Mage is absolutely ridiculous in this deck because as well as reducing the cost of all your spells, it also has this critical second line of text that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, flip a coin, which actually means roll a dice in Magic, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Flip a coin, and if you win the flip, you can transform it. The backside of Ral is a Planeswalker where the important thing is that it has an extra counter for every instant and sorcery you cast. And if it has 8 counters, so if you've cast 6 instants and sorceries, you can immediately use the -8 ability on it, and you'll get to flip over the top 8 cards of your deck and cast any spells you hit there for free, or any instants and sorceries you hit for free. So that's a very big payoff.
Yeah.
Past in Flames, which gives all of the cards in your graveyard that you've already cast flashback, is another very big payoff. And then eventually, once you've, bored your opponent to tears for 10 minutes, eventually you will cast the card Wish, which lets you play a card from your sideboard. And then you'll cast a Grape Shot, which has the ability Storm, namesake of the deck, and that means it's copied for every time you've cast a spell. If this has gone even vaguely according to plan, you've cast easily 30 spells, so you're going to point that all at your opponent. So that's the basic plan. It's a sort of you basically use up your entire deck or a lot of it. And then you wish Grape Shot is the central idea.
Very solid, very solid. It's definitely a very convoluted deck. When you look at it, you're like, wow, so much going on. But when you're actually going off, it becomes almost a guaranteed thing that's happening. Guaranteed in air quotes, because I know it's not always technically guaranteed. It's not like the Storm of Old, where it used to be basically deterministic. Here, there's technically a little bit of room for error, but more likely than not, once you've gotten that Raw flipped and it's ulting, it's over. Everyone knows, unless you flip 8 lands, it's over.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, so I played a lot of the old Gift Storm, which, as you say, was completely deterministic once you were running, usually. And when I first saw this deck, stuff comes out, Storm's bigger Ben, I'm like, okay, I should probably look at this. And I looked at this deck and I was like, I just hate this because it's not deterministic. And then, as you say, you play it and you realize that's not actually true. It looks true when you're looking at the list, but when you're playing it, I think I've lost 1 game after flipping a Ral and using the -8. And I must have done it 50 times by now. It's not technically deterministic, but you never actually lose after doing that, I would say. And then there are still some deterministic lines with Wish and Past in Flames, which I'll just highlight.
Of course.
Don't need to go into detail, but if you make a bunch of mana, cast Wish, you can get Past in Flames from your sideboard. You make a bunch of mana again, you flash back the Wish, you get a Grape Shot from that one, then you flash back the Past in Flames, then you flash back the Grape Shot. It's very nice, it's very clean, and it is actually deterministic if it comes up.
Yeah, fair enough. There's quite a bit going on. And one of the interesting things that I really wanted to kind of have a small chat about is one of the big issues Storm has is the card Consigned to Memory, right? It is a card that is annoying to beat. It's a card that can defeat you if you're not quite ready for it, or if they have enough mana to fight you with it. Obviously, you can overrun it sometimes with a lot of mana, and it also makes your extra plan to win with Thassa's Oracle also not work. With the One Ring potentially being banned, that should drop in play maybe a little bit at the very least, because it's going to bring down not only the One Ring decks, but a lot of people are expecting the Eldrazi decks to also go down in play because the One Ring's gone. If people start playing less consigns, that's really healthy, really good for your deck. How do you think that might work out for you in the post-ban era?
Yeah, no, so as you say, like consigned memory it's annoying. I would say that mostly if you're losing to it on the Storm trigger, then there's a good chance you missed something somewhere. But it's still a very good card. It still counts as Ruby Medallion, if nothing else, which is actually kind of annoying. And more generally, like people, in order to beat the One Ring, people are either going super fast, or they're like trying to interact with the One Ring, which often means playing counter magic and discard. And that's all kind of annoying for you. You'd much rather people were playing removal and trying to play a longer game, because then you can build up your hand and make land drops and so on. So yeah, I think one of the things I've really liked about Storm in general is that even though you are a combo deck and you are fast, the deck wins on turn 3 most of the time if your opponent doesn't do anything to you. In general, and this version especially with Flame of Anor, you can play a longer game. Like you can just make land drops, cast a draw 2 on turn 4, you cast a wizard and you immediately cast Flame of Anor, and it's not actually a good time for your opponent unless they're actually putting you under pressure.
Fair enough.
So we talked about consigned to memory. So consigned to memory is very it answers Storm in a very specific way. Can we just go into that, because just again for the newer people who might not understand sort of what's happening with the triggers, etc.
Yeah, this is important. Someone did mess this up against me at a Comprel event recently. So the way Storm works is that the ability actually reads, when you cast this spell, roughly put a copy on the stack for every time you have cast a spell this turn. Yeah, close enough. The important thing is that when you cast this spell is a trigger. Like when is like a trigger generator word in Magic. It doesn't literally mean when. It doesn't happen instantly. What happens is this when ability goes on the stack, and it's a triggered ability. So anything that counters triggered abilities, such as Consigned to Memory, such as Tishana's Tidebinder, can interact at that point and say, nope, you get your original spell, but all those copies are not happening.
Exactly. And that's exactly what makes Consign such a good card against this. Because one of the big things that Storm does to try and beat these kind of effects are, in the green versions, they play something like Veil of Summer, where it stops their spells from getting countered. In the blue version, you have, Pact of Negations or your own counter spells. Consign says, I don't care unless you can counter every single copy that I've made. Because Consigned to Memory, I'll try and bring it up on screen, actually.
It has Replicate.
Exactly.
Replicate 1, so you could pay 1 extra mana, and then it's almost like a self-protecting counter spell or self-protecting stifle in this instance. So it's 1 mana, but then if you replicate it, you're potentially putting 2 versions on the stack. One is replicated and not cast, which actually is relevant in certain instances, particularly around Chalice of the Void. But yeah, the replicate is almost self-protecting the effect of the spell from a single counter spell.
And it's only limited by the amount of mana that you put into it. So if you have 4 or 5 mana floating around, you go replicate 4 times, or whatever, and then you have 4 copies of the spell. And unless the Storm player has a bunch of copies of counter spells, they're not getting past that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think this is actually a good moment to say, when I was describing the central Storm plan, I said, you do everything, you cast Wish, you cast Grapeshot. And that's definitely what you do if you know your opponent's not doing anything, and you can usually tell by body language. If your opponent's still sitting up and paying attention, probably don't do that. If you have enough mana, cast Wish, get Underworld Breach. Escape the Wish with the Breach, then use the Grapeshot. Because then what you're going to do is, if they're trying to consign to memory your Grapeshot, if they're trying to use Weather the Storm, any nonsense like this, you'll just cast the Grapeshot again, and it'll be fine. Obviously you need to have enough mana, but usually you do once you've fully gone off.
Yeah. Storm, just for anyone who doesn't know, Storm by the end of it usually has like 20, 30, 40 floating mana, just because it has a lot of mana.
And the Wish for Breach can give you more mana if you somehow weren't in that situation.
So what's the rationale? Because I've seen some Storm lists where you play a win condition in the main board, so like a copy of a copy of Grape Shot on the main board and then one in the sideboard, for example? What's the sort of reasoning? And because here it seems you're very reliant on the wish.
Yep. It's about surgical extraction primarily, I would say. So sometimes you do end up casting Wish earlier just because you need to get it out of your hand, because you can do something constructive with maybe making a land drop or whatever. And then if they surgical your Wish, you're literally just dead. Like, you should just... I mean, theoretically you can win with Ral, but you should win and you should concede and move on.
1-3 beats, baby.
So it's how scared are you of... It's two things. One is how scared are you of surgical extraction in people's main decks. Not a huge factor in the metagame right now, but it can come up. You can also just run out of wishes. Like, you know, if you're playing against something like Murktide and they realize you're on this exact build, they might be tactical and try and hold back, say, 2 Force of Negations for your 2 wishes. And just be like, you can do absolutely everything else in your deck. I do not care. I have 2 counter spells. They're going to hit both of your wishes. I'm going to exile both of your wishes, and you're done. So it's people playing around stuff like that. The other thing I would say right now, with Energy being so big, is that Grapeshot's just a good card against Energy. Like, it's in my sideboard guard. It's a card you bring in. It's just a very solid card in that matchup. So I wouldn't expect it to see as much after this BnR, but we'll see.
Fair enough. Makes a lot of sense. It's a very interesting take on everything going on, because right now you're obviously not fearing the surgicals. You're deciding, you know what, if you want to bring in surgical in your main board, go for it. You know, I'm not bothered.
Yeah. If you get got by a main board surgical, then I'm okay. I got fair one.
Yeah,
whatever.
The good old lobotomy effects. But you also have Baral, Chief of Compliance. Obviously, he's part of the wizard package, but he's also, like you were saying, a 10th reducer, which gives a lot of consistency to the deck.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think one thing that happened with the blue for a while, where people were like, oh, I like Flame Vanor, but I don't like Baral. And I just want to be clear, if Baral Chief of Compliance got banned tomorrow, I would still play blue. I would still play Flame Vanor. The card is still good. It's way too good. But given that Baral is actually available, like, there are too many hands with this deck where, in game 1 especially, and on the draw especially. So the weakness of Storm as an archetype is that you don't interact with your opponent, right? Like, your plan for interacting with your opponent is to kill them.
Yeah.
So if you're on the draw and you don't have a reducer in your opening hand, that's a really tough spot. Because, I mean, you could get lucky, obviously, and just draw one. But if you're having to dig for it, you're probably not winning before turn 4. So you're hoping that your modern opponent, who you are not interacting with at all, hasn't killed you by turn 4, or hasn't, like, set up a lock you can't get out of by turn 4, maybe with multiple removal spells or multiple counter spells, that kind of thing. And that's just not a good bet. Like, I hate those bets. Like, I'm mulligan a lot of 7-card hands that don't have a reducer in, unless I know the matchup. And then if you're going to do that, you can't be playing 8, in my opinion. 10 is a much better number.
Makes a lot of sense.
How often does because I noticed that because they always that secret text of Baral is whenever a spell or ability you control is counters a spell, you may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. How often does that ever come up?
I think it has come up for me literally once. Mystical Dispute is a relatively recent add to my deck, and that is by far the most likely way for it to come up. It's mostly flavor text. Like, every time I show the card to people, my Barals happen to be Italian. I'm like, it says instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast, and they're like, no, I can see another line of text. I'm like, yes, I get there is another line of text, but, like, don't worry about it. Like, if it triggers, I'm just not going to do it. It's okay.
Yeah.
may as well say Fettuccine Alfredo is great or something like that, because it doesn't really matter.
So this is a great deck to sort of go into a potentially, or look into now, if you want to be proactive into getting ahead of the sort of BNRs that we expect. You've kindly attached a sideboard guide, so we're not gonna talk about the specific matchups, ins and outs, etc., because that information's there for the listener to peruse in their own time. Do you have any little intricate, I know we've already talked a bit about sort of stuff, interactions, the storm triggers, etc., but is there any little tips and tricks? I know you mentioned some with using Underworld Breach, etc. Any others that as an experienced storm player you aware of, but someone who's picking up the deck might not be made aware of? So tips
Yeah,
and tricks for this deck.
there are definitely some things. So there's stuff that you tend to figure out as you're playing through the deck, like how much mana you need for various combinations. So I'm not going to talk about that too much. But I do feel like every time I play through a tournament with this deck, I notice something I hadn't noticed yet. So a fun one is Ral. So I mentioned that Ral has this sort of whenever you cast a spell, you flip a coin, and then you're either winning or losing the flip.
Yeah.
And the natural way to play this, if it's your main cost reducer, if it's the one you have in play, is to cast a bunch of spells. Maybe you win some flips, but you don't take the flip because it's a May. And you only flip it once you've cast 6 spells. And sometimes you run into spots where you have 6 or 7 spells total, and you think, oh, well, it's just going to be 50-50, or it's just going to be 75-25, nothing I can do, I have no more card draw available. What you can usually do in those spots is cast a spell, trigger the Ral, hold priority. Cast another spell, trigger the Ral, hold priority. So if you have enough mana available, and this normally happens when you have a bunch of rituals, you can basically just sort of put 3 spells on the stack at once. Say, you put spells 4, 5, and 6 on the stack all at once. You put all the Ral triggers on the stack at once. And then when the Ral flips, it looks, and it's like, well, you've cast 6 spells. And so suddenly you've turned that 50-50 chance to win, because it basically is you win if you manage it, into 87.5%, which is much, much kinder. So that's a really nice one, which is a very easy thing to miss when you're playing through it for the first time, especially because on Magic Online, I think you need to press control to hold priority. It's a bit of a fiddly process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all relevant because of, it says when you spells you've cast, not spells that have resolved. It's a very, very fine line of text that a lot of people seem to confuse the two things. They think that cast and resolve are the same thing. They're not. It just means that the spell has been put on the stack at some point or another. And that's really relevant for Ral flipping. It's a really good tip because I know I faced one too many Storm players who play their entire hand at sorcery speed for some reason when they don't have to.
Yep. Then I sort of mentioned this before, but yeah, Thassa's Oracle and to a lesser extent Galvanic Relay are in there in the sideboard as a way to beat the One Ring. It comes up a lot right now. It'll come up less. It also beats Infinite Life. Some healer players running around who, they're like, I've made Infinity Life.
Don't remind me.
And they look at you, and I'm like, okay, yeah, you made Infinity Life. They're like, are you going to concede? I'm like, no. And they start trying to figure out, because a lot of the Storm lists to beat the One Ring are on Empty the Warrens plus Alchemist's Gambit, the take another turn, damage can't be prevented card.
Yeah.
That does beat the One Ring, does not beat Infinite Life. So Heliod players will generally assume that they're safe if they've made Infinite Life, and they aren't, because what you'll do is you'll go through everything, you'll wish, either you'll draw your whole deck and then cast Oracle, that can happen, but often you wish twice. And Galvanic Relay is a Storm card that exiles the top card of your deck, however many times you cast spells. So it's sort of, I will flip over my entire deck and then I will cast Thassa's Oracle, which is very important to be aware of.
It doesn't. There's no negative effects. I mean, I'm asking this just to put awareness. You exile your entirety of your deck. Say if you've got 30 cards in your deck and you exile, Storm is 32. You just literally flip your deck and then you wish for Thassa's Oracle, cast Thassa's Oracle, GG.
Yeah.
Sound.
Yeah.
Nice and easy.
Build
your own demonic consultation. Yeah, nice.
You know what? There's nothing more egregious than when a Heliod player goes, I gained 1 million infinite life, your turn, and you're like, ugh. And you're just there and that feeling must be amazing. You're there yeah, sure, you can have as much life as you want, mate.
They always ask you as well. They always ask you, can you beat infinite life? Every time they do it, without fail.
My actual favorite with this was actually against Nadu, which at various points their plan wasn't to kill you, right? It was to besage you everything, but you have 3 mountains, so you'll still have 3 lands in play. Otawara everything, but you don't care about that. You can win from no permanents in play and gain a ton of life and put a ton of permanents into play. And I'm just like, this is all very exciting and all, but if your plan at the end of this is to pass the turn, then this may not work out the way you were hoping. It really depends if you can interact with my reducers or not.
Have you got any cool beat stories where that you've beat a Halia player on a million life, or you've beat someone who's thought they've just won, and then you're
I've definitely beaten Infinite Life. Like, you have people who have multiple consigned to memories who lose to the Underworld Breach thing that I mentioned. That's a fun one. Yeah, people like endlessly think that they've sort of got you, and the deck just has a lot of it has a surprising amount of resilience. Like, the strength of Storm is a combo deck. The weakness is that you don't interact with your opponent. But the strength is that you can fight through a lot. Like, people will keep these hands with one hate card and think it's good enough, and you can almost always find a way through. Whether it's Empty the Warrens, whether it's just killing the hate piece, whether it's Blood Moon to just slow the game to a point where you find a path. So yeah, no, people overrate their odds against this deck quite a bit, I think, because they don't quite appreciate how easy you can play a long game. And to be fair, I'm playing with Flame of Anor, which makes playing the long game a lot easier.
Makes a whole lot of sense.
I want to build this deck, Luis.
It's very fun.
I actually fancy it.
I literally own my 4 Baral, and I'm so happy I can use them once again, even if it's not the star of the deck. I'm just happy. Storm was gone for so long, especially blue-red. This is great.
So I was massive into rhinos when it was a thing.
Right.
And when Flame of Anor got printed, and the tech with rhinos was to put Mutavaults in the mana base, because obviously modern mana base is just broken anyway. So I was on, like, I think that the Axion tournament that actually won. I was playing the Mutavault, Flame of Anor, and Tishana's Tidebinder, because Tishana's Tidebinder is actually a wizard, so it counts towards the double effect of Flame of Anor. I'll just read Flame of Anor out so so for the people listening know what it says. So it's a 1 blue-red instant. You can choose which one of these effects. However, if you control a wizard, you can cast a spell. You may choose 2 instead. And those options are: target player draws 2 cards, destroy target artifact, or Flame of Anor deals 5 damage to target creature. Now, 5 damage when in the Rhino shell at the time was massive, because Rhino struggled with Shieldred. It struggled with big, chunky 5 toughness bodies. So this was like a massive inclusion in that sort of shell. But here, what this does is that because you've got your Rals who are wizards, and you've got your Barals who are indeed wizards, you can cast your Flame of Anor. You can to get rid of a problem card or a hate piece, whatever, as well as netting yourself 2 cards to dig into your combo, which is mentally good in this deck.
Yeah, this is like very much a card quantity deck. You sort of win once you have a critical mass of resources. So answering the hate while drawing's a very big deal. One other trick I want to mention that people often miss. So Wish doesn't actually force you to cast the card straight away. Everyone seems to think it does for some reason. Maybe because when you play on Magic Online, it like pops up your sideboard in front of you. You can move that to the side. It's fine. It just says you can play a card from outside the game this turn. So sometimes you will play this early just so you can hold up Pact of Negation through your entire combo turn. You'll flash it back later, kind of thing. Often I will stack multiple wishes, and then that does add up the way you want it to add up.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's actually something I just learned.
I remember the first time I learned that. Like, when my opponent casts Wish, I'm like, yeah, okay. What are you casting with it? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have to decide now. I'm just casting Wish. I'm like, what?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they just do that. I'm like, what? That's insane. And yeah, it's for some reason, I think it's because of what's it called? Fae of Wishes makes you cast the card. I think it is right away. Or there's like cards that make you add a card to your hand instead. Think like the Legacy Wishes, the Legacy Wish cards, like is it Glimmering Wish or something like that? I can't remember what it's called. Those make you actually add them.
Wishes puts the card in your hand, and then some other cards do make you cast the effect straight away in this type of thing.
Living Wish, that's the one. Living Wish.
But yeah, no, this is just you can play a card outside the game this turn. You don't have to. You can. You can, if you cast it twice, you can do it twice.
That's insane.
So yeah.
That's really cool.
So you could cast a wish, keep going through your deck, cast the second one to get your win condition or your grape shot or whatever, and then you can still cast your Pact of Negation or whatever from your sideboard, right, because the effect of the first wish is still there.
Yep. It's crazy. It's a great way to hold up a counterspell just without people realizing you can hold up a counterspell.
Which is one of the hardest cards to use correctly in this deck. I will say, like you think you know what to do with it, and then you just find things. So one thing, I added Surgical Extraction to my sideboard for other reasons, and then I realized that. So I mentioned earlier that normally when people don't have anything to do, you can tell from their body language. Unfortunately, when you're playing against good players, this is no longer true. They will attempt to appear engaged, even if they have actual nothing, in the hope that you take a more risky line, because the deck's often not deterministic. In that spot, wish for Surgical Extraction, just so you can see their hand, is a very big deal. If you know exactly what you're playing around, you can almost certainly win in a lot of these spots. It's when you're like trying to think about the 50 different cards they could have that you can maybe psych yourself out.
Get Taxion Probe, but without the card draw.
And that also works to get a free spell for flipping Ral in some spots, incidentally.
Yeah. And
it's only, do you ever get to a situation where you can just like you need to flip Ral and it just doesn't happen? Like your luck just isn't there.
Yeah, I mean sometimes you need to flip, it doesn't happen. I haven't mentioned the fact that when you lose the flip, you take 1 damage. One of the biggest, I feel like I'm losing some equity by saying this, but one of the biggest mistakes that people playing against this deck make is not appreciating that they should try and get you to like 4. Like if you're going off. Even if you're going off without Ral, but your eventual plan to win is to play a Ral and flip it, which is quite often the way you actually win the game. If you're doing that at about 4 life or more, I would say you're pretty good. If you have the Ral in play from the start, you really need more like 6 life plus. And I think energy, especially, I'd often find people sort of they wouldn't put me to 3 when they could put me to 3. They'd like build up a bigger board for the following turn or something. And I'm like, no, if you put me to 3, like, I don't know, 40% of my paths to victory have just been closed off because suddenly I'm going to be hoping that I don't hit tails too many times.
Makes a whole lot of sense. It's definitely not the easiest thing to keep track of sometimes with Rawl, because a lot of people think that Rawl and Storm are exactly the same thing. They're not, the way that they function. I've had a lot of times where someone goes, okay, yeah, I have 8 Storm. I'm gonna my Rawl can now flip. I'll flip it. I'm like, yeah, you have 8 Storm, but part of that Storm cast is Ruby. Part of it is Rawl himself. That doesn't count. That's not an instant or a sorcery. Nice, you have a 6 loyalty Rawl. What are you gonna do with it? So Rawl is a very hard upkeep card that you have to be very careful of.
Any other last minute sort of comments or tips or tricks or anything on this deck before we sort of move on to close down the pod?
I think just the last thing I would say is that, so because Flame of Anor has such high upside, I think sometimes one of the reasons people try this and mess up is they're trying to keep it for the high upside. Like, you should be fine to use this as a 3-mana draw too. If that's the way to use your mana efficiently, if that's the way to keep progressing your game plan, like you pass for 3 mana on turn 3, your opponent probably plays a touch more conservatively as a result, and then you're just like, here's my draw 2, and you move on. Like, if there isn't going to be a premium target for it, you should feel very welcome to do that.
Makes a lot of sense.
I mean, end step, drawing 2 cards, cycle through your deck is just a great deal.
And honestly, it's probably going to be really relevant post-ring, guys. Remember, we're currently expecting Dimir Murktide to be one of the better decks. That's a deck that's just going to hold up a counterspell every turn if they can. If they start wasting their counterspells on your Flame of Anors, that's pretty good for you. You know, you rather them use it on that than anything else if you can then go off because of it. So a lot of these mind games you're going to have to play with your opponent, you know, and learn the play pattern to really make it work for yourself. And very exciting, if the One Ring is gone, your Flame of Anor drawing cards looks better, because now you're not competing against someone else drawing a billion cards. And you're probably going to have an artifact that you can actually kill, because indestructible is a heck of a word, you know?
I've just thought of a tip and trick for Flame of Anor.
Mm-hmm.
So in Thassa's Oracle Mirrors, when Thassa's Oracle trigger on the stack, you can make the other person draw 2 cards.
Yeah. That's true. Because you do make your opponent draw cards as well if you want to.
Yeah, because it says target player draws 2 cards.
Great multi-use card.
Don't lose to Kozilek's command when you're playing Thassa's Oracle. That is my last.
Right, because Kozilek can also do that.
Target player. Someone did that against me once. It's a bad feeling. Just do it with 1 card left in your library. It still works, and then they can't kill you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So, any last minute additions to that? What's the sort of future for you, Alex? What's the next thing lined up for you, magic wise?
Yeah, I mean, we're in standard season right now, but standard RCQs haven't quite gotten going in the UK yet, so I haven't done a huge amount there. The big things for me are modern. So there's Prague, it's the regional championship in Prague at the end of January, and then in Europe we have our first what's it called, Spotlight series, I think, the GP reboot, which is in Utrecht in mid-March, which is also modern.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Hey, I might be interested in that. What's the date? We'll have to find a date to see if I feel a little bit.
It's 15th of March, or whatever weekend contains the 15th of March. So yeah, I'm very much planning to go to both of these. I think I'm booked for both of these.
Nice.
And yeah, looking forward to beating people with Baral Chief of Compliance.
Nice.
If I get beat to death by a Baral like attack, I'm quitting Magic for the rest of my life. It's just I can't.
Oh yeah, that's actually an important tip. Don't forget to attack. Sometimes you win with empty warrens.
So, Alex, can you just plug some? We will attach your social medias and etc. in the show notes. But just want to, for those listening, plug your social media or anything else, your Twitter or etc. Whatever you want people to follow you by, or your Magic Online, whatever.
So we can find you.
Yeah, I mean, people can find me. The links will be there. I mostly post about Magic on Twitter. It's where the community is at. Or X, we're supposed to call it these days. And then I'm Gordy12791 on Magic Online and Magic Arena, and probably some other things as well.
Just before I want, because you mentioned standard before. How are you finding the standard format right now?
I like it. I haven't really gotten to grips with it yet. But I think maybe because I'm still in that, I'm still just trying to explore its stage, and it's a very powerful standard format with the sheer number of sets. Especially now with Foundations actually added a lot of subtle power to the format. So no, I'm enjoying figuring things out.
Do you have a deck of choice?
I feel like I'm supposed to be playing something with Zur, Leyline Binding, Overlords, something. I haven't quite figured out the deck yet. The mana base is a challenge, but if I can, then that is me.
Have a look at Young Dingo's tweets because he's actually exploring with that deck and doing really well with that deck.
Yeah. Zur Domain is quite a decent deck already, and I know Dingo's doing a lot of it, and he's having a lot of fun. So definitely a guy to watch out for.
Sweet. Any last minute afterburners, boys?
No, I think we covered everything there. Hopefully, you guys all enjoyed our nice chit-chat about the modern metagame, what we expect to happen and change. What we're hoping is finally the end of the atrocity that the One Ring was, and that you might like the fiery little spell casting of Blue-Red Storm. It is definitely a deck that plays with fire, but it does it so well that I hope you enjoy it a lot. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll catch you on the next one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and as usual, tell all your friends, family, your grandmothers, etc. to come and join us here on Battle Chads.
Thanks for coming on, Alex. It's been a great chat to you, and hopefully this will be not the last time you come on to the podcast.
Cool thing. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
All right.